should a Scrum Master be technical? The way that question is posed normally, welcome to the Agile Podcast, I think it's the wrong question. Because, again, when that question gets asked, it's because that question is loaded. You know what I mean? The person asking it has some intent behind it. I think that's probably the first place we can pivot to. Because normally, they'll say, should a Scrum Master be technical?
Yep.
Well, no, but does it help them? Oh, of course, man, yes. Of course.
Yeah.
Unhelpful to me.
I know.
That's not the conversation I want to, like, should a Scrum Master be technical? Who would be asking that question? I'm thinking of your development manager who's being told they need a Scrum Master on their teams, or somebody in the organization who's like a manager who's looking at their budget is being like, what's the Scrum Master do on my team?
Yeah, it's usually middle managers, right?
Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
My first response when someone would ask me that would be a question back, which is, why do you ask that?
Yeah, why is that important to the business?
Yeah.
Yeah, let's find that out. But, what problem are you trying to solve by asking that question, basically? If you're looking for a Scrum Master, then look for a Scrum Master. At the end of the day, I mean, it's just,
Or I mean, we could rephrase this whole question to be an Agile coach. Like, should an Agile coach be technical? Should they have technical skill?
They should. So I think we have to define what we mean by technical skill. An Agile coach needs to be technical in the art of coaching, right? In the art of coaching agility. Listen, ask the right questions. Don't throw solutions down people's throats. All of that stuff. That's still technical. It's just not, quote unquote, technology driven, right? They're not looking at experts who are proficient in a given technology stack. That's not what this is about. Same thing I'd say applies to being a Scrum Master. You don't have to understand necessarily the technology stack. You have to know what it is by name.
Yeah.
That's it. You don't have to be a Python expert or a SQL person to understand what that entails. Your team is essentially a bunch of human beings. So you've got to be able to deal with human beings, right? And all of that goes with it, which is empathy, right? Align with what they're going through every day. That doesn't require technical skills. It requires listening skills, right? It requires empathy. It requires, walking in their shoes for a little bit to see what they're experiencing, as opposed to, well, let me see, can we understand what they mean by, trying to code in this language versus that language or whatever, right? I mean, technology is one of those buzzwords that encompasses all of these things. I don't know if I've just helped or made things a lot worse.
You definitely made them worse for me.
I think I have.
I'll tell you why, because during your diatribe right there.
Diatribe. I like diatribe.
Which I enjoyed. I'm 100% supportive of long diatribes on the Agile Podcast. I was thinking in my head the entire time of like the stereotypical overwhelmed, overworked development manager, director of development who's like, why am I paying this Scrum Master? I could afford a developer for what I'm paying this Scrum Master. Like listening skills, what are you talking about? I need someone with hands-on keyboard. That specific phrase for me does it for me. That hands-on keyboard phrase, keyboard. Yeah.
So get a developer.
Yeah.
You don't need a Scrum Master.
Yeah, but again, that's like they're thinking they could get. I saw a job posting go up recently for Scrum Master / something else because it was obviously like I don't know, like business analyst or tester or something. Because it's obviously like the company that put the job title up, they don't really value having somebody who's a full-time change agent and someone who's good at developing relationships and influence in the organization. It either the person hiring for that job doesn't value those skills, or they don't really know what a Scrum Master does.
I think it's both. It's probably in the reverse order. So they don't understand what a Scrum Master really does or should be doing, which is why they don't value what a Scrum Master does. They've got to, air quotes, they got to justify this position. So instead of getting somebody who is a people person, right? Obviously, everybody's going to do their jobs. Why do we need somebody to make sure that's happening? We just need somebody who can help, the hands-on keyboard mentality.
Yeah.
So that's unfortunately too prevalent. And to your point, it's more coming from those people who are the managers or directors of developers because they just want productivity. That's what they want. They don't understand that a Scrum Master's job is to make it easier for the team to coexist together and work remove impediments, all of that good stuff.
Yeah.
They don't understand that.
The old efficiency.
That utilization, efficiency.
Punch out more cogs.
That's right. I just wanted to go one other level here, which is if a Scrum Master who comes in on a team has had a technical background, can it be helpful? I'm going to take the contrarian view here for a second and say it can actually hinder because they come in with their own biases about technology. So typically they are not a developer who is well versed in the current state-of-the-art development technology. They may be somebody who coded in C# or whatever, right? The yesteryear technology, basically, but not like decades ago. So they would be biased towards what they know, and that could be dangerous, I posit.
Yeah, I went through that, I would say, at a certain point, and I think probably talking to you kind of opened my eyes to whatever biases I may have had. I was never really... I don't really ever try to assert my way of thinking on teams and stuff like that with regard to development, I would say.
Right.
But, but then again, maybe not. I don't know. I think when I was talking to you before, we were talking about this on one of the early podcasts. I don't even remember which podcast it was where you're like, well, a Scrum Master coming in with technical ability, maybe you would be more likely to already be anchored on to one specific way of doing something. So like, for example, a specific Scrum event or something, maybe you're anchored on to doing it a certain way. And that might stunt a team's development of developing their own way of doing things because you're kind of stuck with your own way of doing it. So
right.
I'd never really considered that. And then, once we talked about it, I kind of was looking out to make sure that I don't influence in any way, shape, or form without first trying to understand.
I think we've got to also, just moving ahead a bit, we've got to just differentiate between a Scrum Master who is technically proficient versus somebody who understands at a very high level what some of the technology is all about. Like, for example, do they know what a database is? Mm-hmm. Do they know specific terminology? If somebody says on the dev team, someone says, well, I can't do this, but I can do something with Postman, just to take an example. Mm-hmm. If a Scrum Master doesn't know what that means, it doesn't mean that they're not being effective. It just means that if they did know, it would save a question, perhaps.
I would argue the other side of that, rather than as a con, I would say if you have worked, like if you're a SQL whiz kid, but now you're a Scrum Master. Like if you were a SQL whiz kid in your last role or whatever, maybe you built dashboards, and now maybe you're a Scrum Master. That seems very odd to me, transition to make. But who knows?
Right.
As a Scrum Master, you would probably ask more effective questions when you don't see them being asked. Like for example, if people are talking about creating some kind of new auditing mechanism to handle all the new database calls for some new product or whatever, you might ask, are we worried that the logging is going to slow down? Because basically every database call now is going to end up being 3 or 4 additional calls in the back end just so we can keep an eye on what's happening. Are we indexing any of these tables? Like, is this, what again, assuming you're dealing with relational databases in this example.
Right.
Like for me, so on my example there is, now you're asking more powerful questions that as long as you're wrapping your experience in good agile coaching practices of not interfering, asking questions, letting the team basically dropping the grenades into the room and then closing the door and be like, figure it out.
That sounds a bit drastic. I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
So yeah, absolutely, that can be beneficial. Absolutely, there's no doubt. And I was smiling when you said that because that actually happened with me.
Yeah.
The team was super busy trying to deliver to a milestone effectively, and it was a calendar-based milestone, so it wasn't something you could just say it's done when it's done.
Yeah.
And the business wanted some answers, right? I could have leaned on a developer, but knowing SQL, I could just open up SQL Measure. So you go in there, write some queries, and give raw answers. Sure, embed them into Excel and give them to the business. Brilliant. I didn't have to disturb a developer, in quotes. Didn't have to do that because I knew enough to do that stuff. So it can be helpful, for sure. But is it mandatory? By no means would I say that. By no means. You and I both know some very, very effective Scrum Masters that are not technical, but they do great.
Yeah. The other thing that's been a pro for me when I've been in a Scrum Master role has been testing background, because a lot of teams that I join, they don't have professional testers, or maybe they do have professional testers. But a lot of times for the teams that are small but do have professional testers, sometimes the testers are offshore, which is that's its own problem in and of itself that we're not really like looking to tackle right now. But where I can lend some level of expertise is I can come in from having been a senior person in QA and testing to say, you generally should have a test plan and you generally should know what it takes to test the software. But I also can talk through discussions of automation for companies that they're trying to move to more of an automated testing platform, because they kind of understand like this is the way we can scale and that kind of stuff. So I can engage as a subject matter expert where they may not have one in-house.
Yeah, no doubt. That's absolutely right. And I think you can also kind of veer toward like thinking through those things that the development team per se may not, right? Like things like NFRs, scalability, right? Things like security. I mean, you should have an architect that's reviewing all of this anyway, but an architect, let's face it, is also technical.
Yeah.
They may not think about those things,
yeah.
especially early on, which is where you really should be considering all this.
Well, a lot of that stuff, the NFRs and all the dirty BA stuff that used to be all completely in the realm of business analysts back in the day, a lot of the stuff, it is in vogue now for the discipline of product management to just inherit all that stuff. And quite honestly, I will tell you, like, I have a background in business analysis. I have a background in testing. It's too much for, especially a lot of the product managers I see out there are like, 4 years into their career, 1 or 2 years into product management, and it's basically the first job. If you work a job for 18 months in your professional life and then you jump into product management, it basically is the first job that you've had.
Absolutely.
So that's what they get their foot in the door as some level of subject matter expert in some domain, and then they jump into product management in that domain. I didn't jump into product management until I was well past 10, 12, whatever years in my career. So I already had a solid understanding of the domain I was in, the technology that I was dealing with. Already had QA engineering in my background, and I was more of a leadership level before I jumped into product management. I could only imagine being in product management without any exposure to the way that testing works, the way that integration between teams works. Like we talk all the time about, when you're done with individual features, you still have to wrap them together and integrate and figure out if the end to end the whole system works.
Right.
You have to consider the whole system, and then they don't have exposure to DevOps principles and technologies and scaling and performance, everything we talk about, security. Like I was talking about recently at my company, building something that had logins and stuff like that. And the very first question I asked is, can we buy something that deals with all the security? I don't want to have to deal with a security model. If I can pay to get out of having to maintain and go, like, a company's not public, it's a private company. So I'm like, we don't have to go through any audits. But I was like, but if you've ever worked at a company that goes through audits and you have to have come up with a system that has logins and passwords and takes people's personal information and stuff, like, the big companies have this wonderful word that is absolutely meaningless called governance. They love the word government. It's like saying big data. It means nothing. It's just such a giant term that's loaded with so many different things. It means nothing. Because I have enough experience, I know when to avoid getting the company into these very costly things that I can't even imagine. Like, I only bring this up because, like, product management is like the vogue career right now. I can only imagine going into it without any of that experience and having to make all those mistakes. Except now you're the product manager having to make.
Yeah, now you're next on the line.
Yeah,
absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I think over the years we've seen more and more Scrum Masters become savvier, if that's such a word, right, to these things, where they can get ahead of it and say, let's talk about all the elites, reliability, security, all of those
feasibility
things, right?
Risk, dependencies are part of risk. Like, if you have not knocked down those dependencies before your team starts working on it, now you're assuming a huge risk because you won't be able to complete it.
That's right.
Are customers even going to? We talked about this in the last episode with Jessica. Are customers even going to use it? You need to know that before you start building, because you're basically assuming the risk of like, don't worry about it. I know that customers are going to use it.
Build it and they'll come.
I know that.
Yeah.
Build it and they'll come. Except like you're basically making a bet, but you're just pushing all your chips in and be like, nah, we're just going to go all in.
Put them all on zero.
Like, what company is that allowed to just be like every single, even no matter how minor, like pair of twos, all in, jacking at 3, all in, every single round, all in, every single hand, all in. Like, that's, a lot of people do it that way though. They're just all in,
right? And unfortunately, they do.
Luckily, their companies make enough money where they can, they can sustain that cadence of failure, and never learn from it. Just keep betting all in, and because they have legacy products or whatever that make the company money or keep bringing money in, the cost is hidden. But again, this is why we need to do an episode on finance, because the cost is not hidden. If you're looking for it, you can see. If you're tying costs and profitability and all that kind of stuff back to features,
for real,
you
absolutely.
You can see. But most companies are not doing that. They got that big giant yearly budget.
Yeah, they're stuck in the old ways of doing things.
Man, this is a new one for us. A budget, talking about finance and budgeting at 20 minutes. Usually it's an hour and 20 minutes, but before we get to this point. So to bring us back to
Scrum Master being technical.
To the point of your Scrum Master or Agile coach being technical. Okay, so when I hear this topic, what I think is the important thing that should be discussed in this topic, but almost never discussed in this topic, is I hear the question, should your Agile coach / Scrum Master be technical? Should they have a technical background? When they clarify, they'll say, should they have a technical background? My brain translates it into a much better question, which is, should your Agile coach and or Scrum Master have both business agility and technical agility, comprising their knowledge.
Yeah, I'm so glad you went there, because that is absolutely key, and you don't really often hear that.
I think that's a real question that's being asked here, though.
It is a very real question, absolutely, and it's a critical question, right? Because you're hiring somebody to essentially. It's like the old days of Hawaii Five-0, when you saw the opening credits and the drum beats and people rowing. The Scrum Master is almost like the person who is actually, beating the drum. The product owner is looking over the horizon going, we're going that way or that way, and then the team members are just rowing. But business agility versus technical agility.
Yeah.
So often we see Scrum Masters that have neither. Seriously, we do. We business? No. Well, I know what to do because I've read the Scrum Guide.
I did not see that coming. I gotta.
Dude, so often it's like it's scripted, right? The Scrum Guide says we do these events, we do this, we do these things, and we're just gonna do them ad nauseum.
Oh man.
Right. That's the middle of the bell curve that I've seen. Now, where I've seen at the right side of the bell curve are people that have business knowledge, because the technical knowledge. You have other people that have it within the company. Yeah. More often than not. Not always, but more often than not. Now, the leading edge of the bell curve is dangerous. You have technical knowledge. You don't have business knowledge. And these are the people that tend to drive things based on just technology, just the technical knowledge that they have, whether it suits the business or not, whether you're adding value to the business or not. This is what I know. This is what we need to do. I know what we're doing. This is what we need to do.
Oh, I know.
So those are dangerous people.
I know what to do. I kind of want to go down the road of people who have neither business agility nor technical. I mean, like, I will tell people that the Scrum Master, like I was like, if you're a Scrum Master, Agile Coach is a little easier to explain. But if you're a Scrum Master, you have your team or teams, and you have whatever leadership team you're exposed to as your team. So if it's just a bunch of leads, then congratulations, you're the Scrum Master for the leads team, even though they may not on paper be a formal team and they may not know that you're their Scrum Master, but like that's the leadership that you have exposure to. So you are their you are their change agent. Congratulations, you have 13. So you always have a ghost leadership, air quotes, leadership team, regardless of how many teams. Hopefully you don't have more than one or two.
Hopefully not.
Hopefully you don't have 4 or whatever.
Right.
But that's a real thing. And then the other side of that is technical agility. And I guess you could transform technical agility into DevOps, I guess, and it probably would mostly apply. that's kind of what I think of as technical agility. I don't know if you have a different definition.
No, I think that's a good definition. I think that the person who has technical agility should also be aware of the quality angles as well. Are we automating? What percent of tests are passing? Those kinds of things.
Yeah.
They don't have to be fixated on the number. They just have to look at trends. Are we improving? Are we staying stagnant? Those sorts of things. But yeah, largely it boils down to being able to deliver through a solid DevOps infrastructure.
Mm-hmm.
And people don't, we know this, that this might actually be another podcast on its own, but people don't really understand what DevOps even is. They tend to gravitate towards specifics within a tool. DevOps is a CI/CD pipeline.
That's a team I throw work to, right?
That's right.
DevOps team. Or the DevOps, we have one single DevOps guy. We just send him all of our work. He's a DevOps guy.
Exactly.
No. Honestly, I kind of lobby for all that work to be broken. I'm like, anybody should be able to do DevOps work. Like everyone on the development team should have some. I mean, maybe not everyone understands, proxy servers and load balancers and whatever. Technology. But there used to be a certain point back in the day, like when I was starting my career, you had operations people. And they were in charge of all the compute and all the hardware and the switches and the load balancers and the networking, cabling, and all that nonsense. Now all that stuff's done by software. It's all done by right clicks or actually in the best places it's done by code that pushes it out and configures it automatically based on the resources that are necessary and stuff like that. But in order to wrap that into product, and in order for a team to consume it and work on it, again, it really helps having a Scrum Master who understands what all that means.
Absolutely. So let's just draw a distinction. The Scrum Master who understands what that means should just understand. They don't have to be an expert at all this, right? Because it takes quite a while to become an expert on any of these things. Infrastructure as a code, they have to understand what that even means, right?
I don't know if it. I have to think. You know what? This might be ambitious for the podcast, but
we love ambition here.
I don't think that it is that complicated. I think we could do one podcast and knock out all, here's an overview of what technical agility is. And there are some developers going crazy right now.
It's not that simple. You're trivializing.
Some DevOps engineer is like, what are you talking about? You can't go 1 hour. Well, joke's on you because I'll go 3 hours on a podcast. But I think we can. If we just start off with the concepts of DevOps, walk through each one with a good illustration of what it is, I think that's more than enough to arm your typical Scrum Master to be like, hey, do we have solid CI/CD practices? Is it in our definition of done between teams? And if it's not, let's talk about it. How do our code reviews work? Do we have one repo? What's our branching policy between teams? I've been on teams with every change request, aka Jira ticket or Azure DevOps story or whatever, where one work item equals one PR. Yep. And if you introduce new things, then when you go through the code review process, when you go through the PR process, your reviewer will ask you to split the other ones out into a different ticket because they don't have anything to do. They're refactoring you're doing, which is a whole separate discussion about should you change things when you're in that code because you see them and that's we're not having that discussion right now. Maybe we'll have a discussion on a more development-centric podcast. But now I'm getting so far off topic. The point is, I think we could pull one podcast together that's basically a DevOps basics that walks you through the concepts and explains at a high level with illustrations what it is, illustrations, graphics.
Why do it, what it is, how to do it.
And that's it. And I think you could go back to each section and watch it again if you didn't catch it the first time, and then go research it for yourself. And then I think you would know enough to be able to hang in, at least from what a typical development team does.
Yeah,
I think that would be enough.
I agree with you. I think that's all a Scrum Master needs to know, or the depth that they need to know to be effective as a Scrum Master.
Yeah,
they don't have to be an expert. There are other people that are experts. So I agree with you there.
Agile coach as well, I think.
Of course, right. Same by extension, yeah, absolutely.
Because I would think, what happens when you get to the level of an enterprise Agile coach? Do you think that your technical ability, do you think there's a requirement? I'm pretty certain that when you get to the level of an enterprise agile coach, obviously your business agility probably is through the roof. Do you think technical agility scales as well, or do you think you kind of like you're not really dealing with technical teams at that point? I mean, you could. So like business agility is kind of more important at that point. Or like, what do you think?
I personally, so you ask 10 enterprise coaches, you're going to get 15 answers probably. But my own opinion.
Buy my book.
Yeah, exactly. Now, my personal opinion is, of course, right. You've got to focus on the business, and the question isn't necessarily hinged around the how anymore. It's the why. But I think at the same time, if you're not up to date with at least some level of understanding on the technical agility side, you're not very effective as an enterprise coach. Because you're coaching the teams in their entirety. Like your viewpoint is more holistic. You still need to understand what the pieces of the puzzle are, right? You don't have to understand technically how to do it, but you got to be able to understand what it is. So
I think what I heard is you probably won't move up if you don't have some sort of technical ability.
It'll be hard, I think, to be effective.
Yeah. Well, that doesn't necessarily mean you won't move up.
That's true. It doesn't. It depends on the organization.
Buy my book, everyone. There's some developers on LinkedIn who pretty much make a living on slamming agile coaches and like, how can you ever do the job of agile coaching if you haven't been a developer? And then that's like they kind of like it's like the populist developer centric sentiment of like, let's go girls, let's go get them. Grab pitchforks and let's go. I mean, it's kind of silly because there's really not a need for that, but they need a niche on LinkedIn. Sure. So whatever.
It's LinkedIn after all. Yeah. Unfortunately.
Great. We talked about business agility and technical agility. Oh, did we? I don't know if we really did talk about it. I think we kind of zipped through it. We didn't really talk about what is business agility, what is technical agility. We probably should have started with that. What is business agility and technical agility? Like, I think of business agility is something that can be done like without even a development team in the room. Like, you could be employed to increase business's agility and not even have a development team.
Sure. Absolutely. I agree. But then the focus is not on delivering software necessarily. Yeah. It's on the word business, right? It's how do you become agile, remove waste, serve only the minimal things that are needed in order to move the business forward. And basically just remove all the fat and the wasted steps that are there. People that examine value streams, get rid of non-value added steps, reduce delays, all of that. Yeah. Had nothing to do with building software necessarily.
No, I mean, in your stereotypical consultancy model, that's a pretty lean, operating, agile organization, where everyone basically in a consultancy, everyone is on the same level. You're all you're all peers basically, and that's everyone in the organization.
Right.
Even at recruiters or headhunter agencies, everyone's kind of at the same level. Maybe you could say that like, well, there's got to be some head of the agency, head of the department, head of the organization or whatever. Maybe one person, but pretty flat. Anyway, I don't know why I brought that up. Oh, because I was talking about business agility versus technical agility. Well, I know. We started talking about business agility, and then we pivoted to technical agility, and then we defined technical agility to say what's kind of basically the principles of DevOps. And then we went all around the world to talk about, like, we probably could have a whole podcast about, like, if you're not sure about what technical agility is, here's all the concepts of DevOps.
We probably should do a podcast on that subject, I think. What do you guys think? Let us know.
Yeah. What are the concepts of business agility besides the lean concepts, which you already, eliminating waste? I'm drawing a blank right now.
The concepts of business agility revolve around looking at the question why. Why are we in business? What are we here to do? And who else is doing what we're doing? How are they doing it? How are we doing it? And then look at that.
Yeah.
It starts at that very, very high level, and then it quickly enumerates into some things that are more tangible, like what's our cost of acquisition for our customers compared to our competitors? I mean, I'm going way down here. But those are the sorts of things that business agility encompasses.
Well, I think you're outlining concepts that support. I want to make sure that the cost to pivot in order to address a customer's needs are very minimal. Whereas you have like in larger companies, you'll have like a sunk cost fallacy, or you'll have like, well, even if we wanted to change our business model, it's too expensive, or our business is too slow, that kind of thing. Like I think the point of business agility is being able to I'm going to say drop everything because it's the most clearest picture that I can paint. Being able to drop everything and change directions and do something completely different without it hurting, negatively impacting the business in order to meet a customer request. In my business agility definition, I knew there was two things I needed to involve, the German two things that I needed to involve, which was the customer and quickly pivoting, basically, before our competition. I needed to definitely involve those two things in my definition.
I agree. And I think to kind of frame it the same thing in a different way would be to say, from a business agility perspective, the question you would ask is, why do we keep doing things that we've always done, right? Just because we've always done it that way? Or why are we doing these things that we're doing, the operations that we're conducting? Who are we serving? Who are the customers? What do they need? All of that falls into the business agility, right? The umbrella under business. So then you would say, here's what we're doing for X. This is what we've always done. Yeah. This is how we've done whatever the operation is. And then you really analyze that and say, we've done it that way, fair enough. Should we be doing it that way going forward? If so, why? If not, why? Yeah. Right? Look at it that way. And if you do that along all of the dimensions of the business, to me, that's really analyzing business agility. And then what comes out of that is obviously changes, to your point about pivoting, changes that say, let's not continue the same old way because there's a better way, or we should be doing this instead. And some of these things aren't necessarily from within the organization. We've always done X, Y, Z this way. No, some of these are from external sources. There's competitive pressures from the marketplace, right? Like, so for example, if you're a bed and breakfast, you've always done things a certain way. You could improve that by changing elements of that. But the external pressures would be things like, well, look, Airbnb wasn't around all that long ago, but now that's a model where customers can pick the business they want, the accommodations that they want. And it isn't even that they pick the best accommodation, it's the ones that represent themselves in a favorable light. So what kind of pictures do they put online, right? What kind of reviews are out there? Those kinds of things. So you have to analyze those in the light of competitive pressure. Yeah. To me, all of this is part of business agility. Why are we doing what we're doing? The why.
Yeah, now that you've kind of defined it that way, I do have to question like how many Agile coaches and Scrum Masters that I've seen that really understand. Yeah, I mean, because when you come on with a team, you kind of get wrapped up into what that team's doing, and you kind of lose yourself in the day-to-day, and you kind of take your eye off, the bigger picture. And the why, when the why changes, for the bigger picture, when the why starts changing, because you're wrapped up at that level, maybe you're not aware of it. Maybe you don't pay attention anymore, and I could also definitely see people that come on as a Scrum Master, especially what I was talking before, people 2-3 years in their career, they're a product manager. I can definitely see maybe they've never been exposed to any of these concepts.
Sure.
To work as a Scrum Master in a feature factory team that basically they're not really empowered to change anything outside of their one little team. So maybe they're the greatest bubble of little agility inside of their giant domineering waterfall organization. They would never know that like they could be having a much greater impact on the rest of the organization, but they would never know.
I think it's a function of experience for sure. And to my point earlier, a lot of Scrum Masters just simply become mechanistic about how they conduct their craft, so to speak, because they just say, here are the events prescribed by the Scrum Guide, so we must do these, right? Those sorts of things. But I just want to go back quickly to Agile coaches specifically, but even Scrum Masters, right? You're not alone in looking at these things that are business agility concepts. You're not alone. Yeah. You have at your side, you have your product organization, because they're asking the same questions. Yeah. If they're not, they should be. And obviously a Scrum Master's role is to coach the organization, right? And the product owner, the latest Scrum Guide says so. But yeah, they should be leading these conversations if they're not happening already organically in the organization. They should be leading these.
My product owner is my development lead, and he just tells me, be quiet, kid. The adults will take it from here.
Right. Well, yeah, I've seen that before. Just like the adults wear bigger diapers. But the issue really is, are you leading the team toward a cliff, basically? And you're just not seeing the cliff.
Yeah. So let us know if you are heading towards a cliff, and if there's help. There's help.
There's help out there, for sure.
Don't go off that cliff. The thing that we did not talk about in this session is, what are the pros and cons of having an Agile coach or Scrum Master on your team who has strong business agility skill / knowledge? So maybe they don't have a technical background, but they have strong business agility skill. Like, if you're a development team, like heads down, hands on keyboards, hands on keyboards, like that kind of managed team, like now you're injecting someone who has strong business agility, understanding and skill and talent. What are they going to do for your team that your team doesn't even know they're about to do?
Yeah, that's a great question. To me, simply, it just means this, right? So if your hands on keyboard and your Scrum Master is technical, etc., as opposed to having business agility, they're building the thing right, essentially. Right? Whereas somebody who comes in that has this business acumen, has this viewpoint of why are we building this as a business, etc., they're building the right thing. Sure. So I think both are important, but I would venture to say building the right thing is more important than building it right. I mean, how many times do you see out there a version 2 comes out just to cover up the flaws of version 1, but it's a product that is needed in the marketplace?
Yeah.
So I'd say that's the essential difference between the two.
I would also venture to guess that the Agile coach or Scrum Master, the person working with your team who has a solid grasp of business agility, can also be a lot more helpful to your product owner on that team. A lot more helpful.
Undoubtedly. Absolutely. They speak the same language.
Yeah.
So, makes sense.
Yeah, because they speak the same language. But at the same time, where they could elevate your development team is they're tying them back into the why that you pointed out before. They're tying them back into the why, and now the team has a better understanding of how the work that they're doing fits in with either the other teams or the rest of the organization or the non-development teams in the rest of the organization. You know where I'm kind of driving at with this.
Yeah, absolutely.
But integrating teams and helping them better work together, that has nothing to do with technical ability.
There's enough people out there with those kinds of skill sets on your team. If not, they're easy enough to get. So, absolutely concur with that.
Yeah, and I would say the glue that holds teams together inside of a larger program, usually that's the first place that weaknesses or cracks appear. We did a whole podcast on integrating between teams because it's such a problem. Well, this was a weird topic.
This is strange.
Off of a cliff. Yeah, it was a strange topic, but people ask this question all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And people answer this question all the time, and I very rarely like their answers. So I figured we'd talk about it today because I kind of feel that whenever people answer this question, they don't answer the right question. Like, oh, should a Scrum Master have a technical background? Should a Scrum Master be technical? Well, I think the real question you're asking is, what mix of business agility and technical agility should a Scrum Master have? And if your answer is none of either, like that's probably not good. And then, why are you looking for that mix? Hopefully, you know your business well enough to know, well, I need help in this area, I need help in this area, and you're not just saying like, why would I ever hire anyone that doesn't have technical ability? You know? Because that might be a very biased question to ask. You might be asking the wrong questions.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. And if you're just wanting to recruit a Scrum Master for the sake of, quote unquote, keeping your development team in line, then that's a different proposition altogether.
Just go hire a project manager.
Exactly. Or promote one of your devs to do it. Let them rotate. Whatever.
Let them play the role.
That's right.
I love that term.
Play the role.
Play the role. Playing cops and robbers. Play the role.
Oh, that's awesome.
All right. Well, if you want to like and subscribe, you can be the robber and I can be the cop.
Yeah, smash that button.
Oh, don't! I'll come out as a police. Don't be smashing any buttons.
No smashing.
That is property destruction.
Gently encourage that button.